Hey guys, it's Liv here, and in today's video we have part 2 of ranking every single ability in competitive Pokemon. You guys seem to really fucking love the first part. In fact, I think it's actually my most viewed tier list besides maybe Mythicals, because just sheerly off the timing of when I did it. So I really do appreciate the support on that. Obviously, it really did show you guys truly did want a part 2 to this. We got like 150 likes. If I was gonna set a like goal for that, it would have been like 70. So you guys more than killed it. Here's part 2 today. If you enjoyed today's and you enjoyed part 1 and you want to see more, leave a like on the video and subscribe and comment what other tier lists you want to see. I think I have enough in my schedule doing Mondays and Friday tier list for literally one more idea that's not type based before Scarlet and Violet, and the best one will be the one that we do on that Monday before the gen. That's what I'll promise. But best idea in the comments below. Winner gets their vid Monday before Scarlet and Violet. The rest of you guys, I don't know. But regardless though, I do have to really quickly make a couple of I guess amendments to the tier list. You guys might even see it on screen already, but a commenter actually by the name of Badass Frostlass had pointed out a couple things that I very much was inconsistent on in the last tier list. And I do appreciate the comment actually, because I ran some calcs later on and realized, oh my fucking god, this is really bad. So the first one being adaptability. This was a pretty obvious one. If you looked at other rankings for stuff such as Dark and Fairy Aura, adaptability literally is just a stronger boost, and potentially for even multiple types. Probably honestly belonged in the top tier ability as well. I don't think it belongs in the should not exist tier. I do actually think adaptability is fairly balanced with distribution on top of potential, but at the very least tiering it below stuff like Dark Aura, even comparing distribution wise, Mega Lucario is still a fucking monster. So there really was genuinely like no case for it not being a top tier ability. The other one though is a little bit more of a gray area. As you can clearly see looking at top tier ability, we do have two more other additions, being Guerrilla Tactics and Intrepid Sword. And I actually swapped these with Huge Power, which I guess is a good place to start. We can throw in Pure Power in this as well. But the logic here being is that Pure Power and Huge Power actually give more of a boost. And in my mind, when I did do this tier list, adaptability was just a genuine oversight. But with Huge Power and Pure Power, I was thinking when doing the tier list, oh, okay, it's just an extra attack boost. And I was thinking that the one stage attack would be comparable to doubling the attack stat. And I don't know why I thought that, to be honest, but Huge Power gives like significantly more damage. In fact, if you were to calc this, you can calc the difference out yourselves, but with Guerrilla Tactics or with Intrepid Sword, if you were to replace these abilities on a Pokemon like Mega Medicham, the difference in damage is several, like 50-60% difference. I literally just did the default calc off of Abomasnow just because I didn't feel like changing the Pokemon, and I think Huge Power gives like a 70% damage increase with High Jump Kick. And I get that, to be fair, it's a super effective move, it's a big difference, but the damage difference definitely does exist. It's pretty significant, so I swapped their tierings for Huge Power and then Guerrilla Tactics and Intrepid Sword. Otherwise though, the tier list will be the same going forward, but let's start off with the ends. So for anything we covered in last tier list, I'll quickly mention what ability it's just like. Not to say that our first option is like anything, but I did just want to mention that though going forward, because there's no need to go over an ability we've run over 20 times. Natural Cure. Natural Cure is a pretty decent ability actually. When you swap, you can clear your status. This is an amazing ability on certain Pokemon, and I think especially in tandem with just the distribution of Pokemon that get it, stuff like Chansey and Blissey that get Teleport now to switch out with this ability is actually a really strong ability. I would put this just in the strong ability tier. I don't think it's top tier. I think that on defensive Pokemon there's better abilities, stuff like Unaware, for example, or Magic Guard and Magic Mounts. But if I'm gonna have an ability that's not like a top 5 defensive ability, Natural Cure is still a pretty strong shout. Next up we have Neuroforce. This is basically, for super effective moves, I think it's just a slightly stronger Expert Belt. It's either 1.25 or 1.2 times, but the essential function of it is Expert Belt. So in terms of, yeah, it's 1.25. So in terms of where I want to rank this, I'm going to put this in strong ability. We have a lot of other abilities in the top tier that do just this but better, because they don't have the restriction of needing to be super effective. And some of these even just give out a better damage boost. Stuff like Huge Power giving 1.2, well actually no, it's just a double attack. Guerrilla Tactics and Intrepid Sword being 1.5. Libero gives every stab 1.5, which while it's only stabs instead of super effective, you can tailor that typically super effective, and the boost is a significant increase more. For other stuff as well, we have a few others that, again, while only single types like Dragon's Paw and Dark Aura, they give stronger boosts, adaptability. It's only stabs, but it gives a significantly stronger boost. So I feel like Neuroforce personally is just a strong ability. It's a really good one though, and I think this has competition on it has an argument for top tier. I just don't have it there yet. Neutralizing Gas. This ability just clears other abilities on the field for every other Pokemon. So this is similar to Mold Breaker, but it does actually function different because in certain cases, this stops abilities from activating across the board versus Mold Breaker, which would only just get around abilities that annoy stuff. I think this is a top tier ability, and truthfully, I do actually think that Neutralizing Gas is arguably a top 5 ability. I think that the difference is though, is I don't think it's an uncompetitive ability, whereas the stuff like these two, I feel like these are just outright insanity to allow. They're just way over the top, I think, for defensive switch-ins, and it's really just, this is balanced by distribution, and this is just not balanced at all. But Neutralizing Gas, I do actually think is a pretty amazing ability, and I think it's balanced enough to where I wouldn't say it should not exist. As far as No Guard goes, this makes it so that all Pokemon on both sides of the field have 100% accuracy with their moves as long as even one No Guard user exists. It's a really good give and take, and I think that it has a lot of benefits, but the fact that you can get taken advantage of pretty easily by stuff like, for example, Hurricane or Thunder now having 100% accuracy, or even just statuses hitting you with 100% accuracy, it's a pretty big deal. So because of the fact that it's a double-edged sword, and while you can get taken advantage by this, you also get a lot of options, and all these No Guard Pokemon typically do have really strong options to take advantage of this ability. So I do think it's in the strong ability tier. I think the drawbacks do pull it down from being top tier though. If it was only one-sided, this honestly could have a case even for should not exist. But I think the fact that it is so well balanced, actually, it just is a strong ability. Normalize. Detrimental, I would argue. This might sound a bit weird, but I think that making all of your moves normal type is a bad idea. Not only this, but it's the same exact damage boost as something like an Aerialate, but it makes every single move normal. It's not just changing normal moves to normal and giving them the boost, or just giving normal type moves this boost, it makes every attack normal. And I think that's a detriment. You now make it so then you have no form of coverage, you make it so then you have multiple resistances, no super effective hits, and you also even give yourself a typing that could switch in on you with no drawback ever. So I think it normalizes is actually just a detrimental ability. Despite the damage boost, I think it's detrimental. Oblivious, this makes it so then you can't get things like taunted or also intimidated actually, which is really cool. I think that the Intimidate buff actually does help us a lot personally for the potential of, if this was just Infatuated or Taunted, I'd put it in average, but the Intimidate buff I actually do think puts in the strong ability tier. It's not an ability we really see actually taken advantage of for Intimidate, but it's another potential to wall on Intimidate, and I genuinely do think that it's more so just the fact that there's not really a lot of good Pokemon in doubles with Oblivious that also do thrive in doubles. I think it's really just, this has the potential to be a good ability for doubles, it's just not really a great distribution for it. But even still, I think that in general, this ability has a lot of going for it, so we'll put it in strong ability tier. Overcoat, this makes it so that you're immune to sand and hail damage as well as stuff like Spore. I would say this is an average ability. Making sure that you're not taking damage from stuff like sand and hail is pretty nice, and certain Pokemon do benefit from this, but in the end, the only benefit this actually does have over an ability like Magic Guard would just be the fact you can't get Spored, which is a decent ability if we're going to talk about something like a doubles tier, for example. This actually would have a precedent because of how much Spore and also just powder moves in general, stuff like Rage Powder. So I do think that in doubles is a decent ability, but its singles usage, it's just worse Magic Guard. And the doubles usage on the Pokemon that you would typically find Overcoat on, it's not really, or even just the potential to really utilize Overcoat over Magic Guard. Again, really the biggest benefits would be no Rage Powder, which is a decent one, but it's not really something that a Pokemon like Reuniclus would probably just give up running Magic Guard for. And the only other one would be the Spore immunity. But again, I don't really think it's something that a Pokemon like Reuniclus, for example, or other Pokemon that would have the choice between Magic Guard and Overcoat would really give up Magic Guard for, because it's such a specific case, and even if it's more prevalent in doubles, it's not prevalent enough to give up that. So we'll give it average. Overgrow. We're putting this with Blaze. It's just grass type Blaze. Own Tempo makes it so then you can't get confused. And I think that Own Tempo even raises evasion. No, it's literally just cannot be confused and it's immune to Intimidate. So it's just a worse version of Oblivious in my opinion. Not being able to be confused is kind of decent, and the Intimidate immunity is still nice, but I'm going to put this in the average ability tier. This would be niche for sure if this wasn't for the fact it has the Intimidate immunity. That's actually a pretty decent buff for it though, I won't lie. It's still just a worse version of Oblivious. Parental Bond, 1 extra hit per turn, and it's a 0.5 times the damage for that hit. So let's say for example you're going for a high jump kick and this does 80% accuracy. Your next attack would do 20% damage. I said 80% accuracy, I meant 80% damage. The next one would do 20%. So this is a pretty broken ability. I will say they did actually nerf this enough to where I think it's just a top tier ability. The one thing I will say actually, no. I do think this should not exist. But it's for one specific instance actually, and it's how it interacts with moves like Seismic Toss. Making sure that you essentially have no drawback from this, I do think that part of it should not exist. Albeit, I think if they just made Seismic Toss and other moves like that have a fixed damage rate based on level or other instances to where they scaled to a quarter of that damage rate, I think this would just be a top tier ability, but that aspect of it is actually extremely easy to take advantage of, and it allows Kang to do astronomical damage in the Ubers tier. While Kang isn't exactly the most viable Pokemon these days, being able to do 200 damage without any actual resistance to it is a pretty insane thing. If we look at Ubers, while a lot of box arts do break that 100 HP mark, not a lot of those box arts that do actually have strong recovery on a lot of the common sets. If we look at Pokemon like Groudon and Zygarde, for example, yeah, they have a lot of HP, but you're not really running any recovery on these Pokemon aside of maybe rest. So we'll put it in should not exist. So moving on to our next ability, we have the Pastel Veil. So Pastel Veil is pretty interesting actually. I'm pretty sure this ends up just being some sort of poison immunity, and it also does work for allies, which is pretty good, and you can even potentially cure poison, which is also actually really good. I think that there's a couple things that I'm not really huge on with this ability though. For one, the fact that Pastel Veil seems to only work for poison, though I will say as well, the fact that this cures both yourself and the ally every time you switch from Rapidash, which is pretty cool. So I would say this is probably, I'd say it's probably a niche ability. I think the one aspect that it doesn't really help a lot with this is that typically, at the very least in doubles, most metagames end up being a very offensive metagame, and Rapidash also just wouldn't, well, not Rapidash, I feel like this ability in general wouldn't really be the go-to on a lot of defensive teams. There are certain situations I could see this maybe being useful, but they're all on Pokemon that already exist without this ability. It's not even like a potential to make this ability a thing, because I think a lot of defensive VGC teams already have the pieces they need just across several generations. You would basically need like some sort of, I guess, some sort of Pokemon with a similar typing, like a Psychic typing that also was really bulky, like at least for Uniclus level bulky, though probably even bulkier to be honest. And it would need to be something that would be really good to pair with, I don't know, some sort of Porygon type mon, and you just try and use the Pastel Veil to really clear the poison there. Otherwise, I can't really name an instance where you would actually really want to use this ability. And even then, you would basically need to literally like craft your own unique Pokemon for a very niche case to do this. So this is definitely niche. Perish Body, this basically on contact makes Perish Song, which is pretty decent actually. Albeit I think this really just comes down to not having great distribution, but the ability itself is actually kind of cool. This gets average for sure. I don't really think it matters outside of maybe Perish trapping specifically in doubles, but otherwise though it's kind of cool as an ability. I could unironically see this maybe depending on how passive a certain format was. If we get another like no mechanic format for whatever reason, something like this plus Goth could actually be really cool, or even just some sort of mechanic that lies less in the offensive side. This could end up being a pretty cool option. But as long as we keep getting really offensively biased mechanics, I can't imagine actually that Perish Body will have a stronger place than just a viable ability, so we'll put it in the average tier. Pickpocket. When you lose an item, you take something. This is literally just Magician, I think, I think it has like a very slight twist in the ability. Where did I actually put Magician? I'll be honest. There's so many things. Magician's right here, an average. And yeah, I'm pretty sure Pickpocket literally works the same way. It just, I know that with Pickpocket at the very least, this is one of those things where you have to have no item and then be hit by a contact move, or just hitting in general with one. It's like if we values as knockoff accounts. But again, literally just magician, so average. Pickup, no competitive use as far as I'm aware. If pickup actually has a competitive use, that would be news to me, but I'll even double check it just to make sure that I'm not forgetting something here. Actually, hold on. Okay, so this now actually has a competitive use of finding something from the adjacent Pokemon, so it's literally just pickpocket. So okay, it's literally just pickpocket. Pixelate, the same tier as Airlate. It's fairy type Airlate. I don't really think that this has any actual reason to be tiered above. It's just same as Glaciate and every other ability of that sort. Where was, oh, you know what? It's Refrigerate. It's not Glaciate. It's Galvanize I was thinking of like that. The point being, though, is it's fairy type one of those 8 abilities, so it gets the strong ability tier. Poison Heal. Not only do you get the immunity to poison, but you also actually recover 12% instead of taking 12% each turn. One thing I will say is I think, again, similarly to a couple other abilities, they did a really good job at balancing this, because in theory, this could have actually been a really should not exist ability, and it could have probably been unironically one of, if not the best defensive abilities. And it's for the sole reason that they included Toxic in the same 12% every turn. If they made Badly Poisoned scale up, this could have actually been a really monstrous ability and an outright uncompetitive one for defensive teams. Like, I would argue actually rivaling like Huge Power and As 1 for levels of uncompetitive if it's stacked each turn. And while you could definitely force certain Pokemon out, there are definitely matchups where this would arguably become an auto-win scenario, where your opponent can never actually out-damage you, because they would basically need to get an O-kill on you because of how many turns you were sitting. And I think in that regard, I'm really glad that Poison Heal doesn't just recover for every amount of poison you would have taken that turn, and it's just a flat 12%. So did a really good job of balancing this. It's definitely a top tier ability for sure. Even still, it's an amazing defensive ability. Poison Point, when you make contact, it poisons. I would say this is average. It's just Flame Body, but for poison, and we put Flame Body here. Poison Touch, this is the same thing, but I think it's based on you making contact, and I think it's really the only difference. Even still, it's pretty much the same enough, at least, to still get here. Power Construct, Pop Zygarde's forms. I'll put this right here. It's honestly a pretty good ability, and you can take advantage of either Zygarde form to do it. And I think that specifically is what makes it top tier, albeit using 10% is a really niche case, but there have been certain instances where that's kind of worked. Mostly on either Sash variants or on variants that really just need the extra speed for a little turn. But Power Construct in general is just a really obnoxiously good ability. Power of Alchemy. I'll be honest, I forget how Power of Alchemy works. I know that this has some sort of partner or other ability that works similarly. It copies the ability of, okay, so it's literally just Receiver. Okay, so I would say this is actually an average ability, albeit I think that in Muck's case, the reason why no one ever runs it is because Muck just has better abilities, but being able to copy the ability of an ally that faints can actually be pretty good, and you could definitely tailor this into a really obnoxious scenario. For example, one that I can think of offhand actually would be utilizing some sort of move like Shadow Sneak and KOing Shedinja and now giving your alone Muck Wonder Guard. Could honestly be pretty fucking terrifying, if not for the fact that that alone Muck would have an immunity to ground hits. Though one thing you could do actually, depending on if you are the fastest Pokemon on the field when that happens, you could unironically utilize that with like an Air Balloon Muck and just make this thing unkillable outside of something like a Will-O-Wisp, which even still would be really good in that regard, because you would basically have to die to status at that point until an Air Balloon was popped, which couldn't really happen. So I think there are ways that you could unironically actually cheese this and make it really good, but they're so hyper specific, and it really only actually has any usage in doubles, and even then it's outclassed by stuff like Gluttony sets because of how hyper specific of an instance it would need to be an obnoxious ability. So I will say that with that in mind, it's an average ability. Next up though, we do have Power Spot. It's basically just, this is the Friend Guard equivalent of offense, I guess. 1.3 times for partner Pokemon. This is really decent actually, because unlike with Battery, this is for all moves, whether physical or special, whereas with Battery, it's just special attack. So Power Spot is really good in that regard. I would say this is a really decent offensive ability, and the fact that it's literally just all moves have their power boosted instead of just the fact that it's only on special attacks is what puts it in the top tier ability tier. Prankster, priority to status moves. This is definitely a top tier ability in my opinion. This is one of those abilities that there's always a prankster Pokemon that will dominate in VGC in some way, shape, or form. And in this gen, we actually had 2 that were both top 10 Pokemon. It's great to have the prankster utility because of moves like Scream, Status, Tailwind, etc. that can outright control games in such a short time span for offensive teams. So in VGC, respectively, especially, this is a really obnoxiously good ability. Easy top tier. Moving on to our next ability, we do have Pressure. So Pressure just makes it so within offensive moves that your opponent uses take 2 PP instead of 1. I actually do think that Pressure is a pretty decent ability. I'm putting this in the strong tier, and I know a lot of people might actually disagree with that. Specifically, I'm looking at people who either play VGC and don't understand how good this ability is in singles, or for people who play a lot of more just button clicking teams. But as far as defensive ability goes, this is actually an incredible one. Pressure is really useful on a lot of different defensive Pokemon, such as Suicune, for example. We've seen this countless generations where Suicune will rest talk sets, and typically it can muscle past even checks to Suicune because of the fact that you can stall through PP, make it so within their moves that can you either miss or just get farmed through by rest turns. You can fish for Skull Burns easier and then make yourself even more able to take on their attacks that would otherwise kill you. With Calm Mind sets especially, in tandem with Scald, it's a really obnoxious ability, and not just on one Pokemon. There are a lot of other Pokemon that can utilize Pressure similarly. For example, Eternatus this generation actually in Ubers is an amazing user of this ability. For other Pokemon that utilize this really well, we have Lugia, which, well, multi-scale is an incredible ability. Lugia's done generations before where Pressure is actually actually is a good ability on this. Mewtwo can kind of do it, but again, on nerf sets are probably better. Dog and Palkia are decent users of this. Giratina is a great user of this, actually. In lower tiers, let's say, though, because I know I've mentioned a lot of Uber's examples, Corviknight's a decent pressure user. Zapdos even is a not bad pressure user, though I know a lot of people have been switching to Static recently. Pressure's still decent on it. For other Pokemon this generation, Dusclops is a pretty decent one, but Frisk is also really good. But the point being, though, is that there's some decent options to actually really take advantage of this ability, and it's a pretty gross defensive ability. Easy, strong ability. I don't think it's top tier, though, because I think the difference is that there's a lot of Pokemon that can also take advantage of Pressure, specifically other defensive Pokemon that have moves like Toxic. And while you rest your way through these moves, typically a lot of defensive teams will also have ways around making sure that you can't really get around this. So it's kind of just a stalling game, truthfully, with Pressure, but it's one of those things that I think in general this generation is an amazing defensive ability. Next, though, we do have Primordial Sea. This is just Desolate Land, but for Kyogre. So top tier ability. It doesn't really, these two are pretty even in my opinion. Next up, Prism Armor. This makes it so that super effective attacks do less damage. This is easily a top tier ability. It's literally, I think it works the same as Filter, but if I remember correctly, this can't get broken through by Mold Breaker, I want to say. For Prism Armor, I do actually need to double check this because I know for a fact at the very least that stuff like Solgalios, Full Metal Body, and Lunala's Shadow Shield both have the Mold Breaker immunity, so I would assume that Prism Armor also gets that treatment. Yeah, so this cannot be ignored by moves or abilities, so that might even extend actually to Sunsteel and Photon, but I couldn't actually verify that because the difference being is that with stuff like Shadow Shield, it does actually specify what can and can't break it, so I do want to double check this. Yeah. So never mind, this just flat out has nothing that can break it. So in general, it's still definitely a really top tier ability. It's just a better version of Filter. So I'm actually going to move Filter down for that reason. I'm going to move it down to the strong ability tier just because of the difference. So another amendment that we're making. Propeller Tail, I'll be honest, I forget what Propeller Tail does because Barraskewda never needs to run it. So I do actually need to double check this one as well. It seems like, okay, so it's just Stalwart, can't be redirected. It's kind of decent. I'd give it average, I would say. Redirections, being able to avoid that is really good for VGC, but it's not really an ability that would ever have usage in singles. In fact, it's so unusable in singles to the fact that even if you weren't running a rain team, you would never run this because you just run Swift Swim on Barraskewda in singles, because at least there's the option that your opponent might be running rain. So I think it's literally no usage in singles, and it's okay in doubles. I'll give it average. Actually, I'll give it niche. No, I'll give it average because redirection's actually pretty decent. Protean, it's just another reskin Libero. It's the same ability as Libero. Psychic Surge, it's the psychic version of Electric Terrain. And I don't really think that the terrains really outweigh each other this generation. Last generation, I think specifically because of how good Lele was, you can make a case that Lele would have been should not exist. but they're all truthfully pretty balanced, and they're all pretty even with each other in my opinion. Punk Rock boosts sound moves by decent damage. This definitely gets a strong ability. Punk Rock being able to boost moves like Overdrive and also Boom Burst especially. Toxtricity is able to actually make this into a move that's really damning for a lot of teams. Not only this, but it also takes less damage from sound moves, which is a really cool benefit. For sure, this is a strong ability. Next up, we have Pure Power, just reskinned Huge Power. It's the same exact ability. This still should not exist. Next up, we have Queenly Majesty, avoids priority as a whole. This is actually a really top tier ability in my opinion. Being able to, while this might not seem like a huge thing for singles, it still definitely has usage for certain mons, especially in Serena's case. Being able to get around attacks like a Fake Out, I guess, which isn't really that common in singles anymore, but still other moves like Grassy Glide, Extreme Speed, etc. Or if we're looking at VGC end, this is an amazing Rillaboom check, and it's probably one of the better ones you can get outside of Incineroar, which even still Rillaboom can run moves for Incineroar, whereas Serena, if you're not clicking U-turn, alright, walls this, and also Serena can go for U-turn or Axel back. And because the fact it's slower, you can typically pivot out and counter out whatever Rillaboom would pivot into. If Rillaboom stays in, you also have the access to triple Axel, which you could also click and be pretty solid if your opponent's Intimidate user is Landorus, because if you were to, let's say, utilize U-turning Rillaboom into a Landorus to try and drop this thing's attack, you could just go for Axel on Serena and take it out anyway. So Queenly Majesty has some really good usage on Serena in general, and I think even outside of just distribution, the fact that you can outright ignore priority, you're not just making priority moves go down to a base level, you're outright immune to the moves that have priority. And this does extend to just statuses. It's an outright immunity, and it does redirect in doubles too. So for example, if I have Alecki and Serena on the field and someone tries to E-speed my Regieleki, I'm completely immune to it because of Queenly Majesty. And I think the fact that it does extend to the ally puts us in the top tier ability tier. If it was just only for Serena, that'd still be a strong ability, but I think the fact that it extends to allies puts us in top tier. Quick Draw, potential for Quick Claw. This is an average ability. I think it's really good on Slowbro because of the typing, and the fact that it has mixed offenses and a good toolkit. Toolkit's the word I was looking for. It has a good toolkit to take advantage of this. But even still, I think it's a little bit too circumstantial because you kind of just need to hope. It's a little too luck reliant for me personally to put this in the strong ability tier, but it's definitely decent nonetheless. Quick Feet, when you're status, you get the speed boost. This is average. I think most of these Pokemon typically would prefer having Guts, and I can't actually think of an instance where Quick Feet and Guts being on the same Pokemon would actually make Quick Feet the better option. In fact, I'll make sure to double check this. So Ursaring is the only one that actually gets both, funny enough. And again, it's one of those ones that never really wants Quick Feet unless it's a very specific team. But typically, you'd rather just run Sugarman and Guts. Rain Dish. With Rain, it's recovery. I think we have Ice Body somewhere on here already. And I'll be honest, I forget where I even put it. But, oh, you know what? Yeah, no, where's Ice Body? Because I don't even know where I put Ice Body, I'll be honest. But it's not really a great ability, in all honesty. As far as, I mean, yeah, Ice Body. Okay, so it is a niche. Okay, I was gonna say, because I was thinking niche, even if I couldn't find Ice Body on here, and I was thinking it might have just been an oversight that Ice Body got missed. But yeah, no, they're both definitely niche abilities. Recovery and Rain isn't that huge, and typically you'd rather just go with a Swift Swim or some other ability of that sort. Rattled, when you're hit, I think it's by like a Ghost, Dark, or Bug move, you get some sort of boost. I'll be honest, I forget what the specifics are. Yeah, so its speed is raised by hit, Ghost, Dark, or Bug, and or Intimidate. Wait, or Intimidate? Okay, that's actually not bad. Albeit, I wouldn't say that this puts it in the average ability. Well, actually, no, I would say this puts it in an average. Rattled getting a speed boost off Intimidate is really decent in that regard. At the same time, though, you're losing attack, which isn't great, but if it was, I do actually, no, let me double check this, because if it's an immunity to Intimidate, then that's really good. If it's just gets the speed boost, if a Pokemon, yeah, so it also activates, okay, so it's not an immunity. So with that in mind, I'm actually gonna put niche. If it could avoid the Intimidate altogether and still get the speed boost, I'd put it in average or even strong. Receiver, this is just Power of Alchemy, but reskin, so we're gonna put this in the average ability tier. Reckless, for moves that have a chance to crash, this, or recoil in general, this gets a 1.5 damage boost, or I think it's just a 1.3. It's a damage boost nonetheless. It's still a really good ability in my opinion. Well, actually it's 1.2, but even still, recoil or crash, stuff like Flare Blitz, for example, stuff like High Jump Kick, for example, both get the boost. Strong ability for sure, just there's a lot of better offensive abilities. Refrigerate, it's another one of the aids. I thought it was Glaciate at first, but that's a move, not an ability. top tier ability, not top tier, strong ability. Next up, we have Regenerator. Regenerator is one of those abilities I think that people are starting to come around on and realize this is an ability that I think should not exist. Specifically, I would not have answered this way in Generation 7, but I think in tandem with stuff like heavy duty boots, this has become an ability that just is uncompetitive. I will say that I think if they nerf Regenerator's recovery or nerf how much immunity you get to hazards with boots, I think that this would be a more balanced ability, but it's the fact that you could just throw boots on any Regenerator user, have a complete immunity to hazards, and now just no drawback come in and gain a 30 health back after switching. That, in my opinion, brings us to a should not exist ability. I think that, as I said, it's just one of those things where I think the ability as a concept is fine, but they made it to where accidentally this is now a really broken ability because of boots. And I think it's solely because of boots that it's gotten to the broken tier. Even if boots didn't exist though, this would be a top tier ability and it would probably be a top 5 one among this cluster, even by the end of the tier list. Next up we have Ripen. Double activates berries. Honestly, this is a pretty good ability. I would say this is strong. You can utilize this even with weakness berries and get a 1/4 resistance, which is pretty useful actually. For just certain Pokemon, depending on the hit you're trying to take. Yeah, I know that Appleton and Flapple and also Applin aren't exactly the best users of this ability, but it's still a pretty decent one actually when you could double the effect of a berry, especially when you could always recycle it back as well. This is strong for sure. Rivalry, gender differences make the attack either go up or down, depending on if it's same gender, it's up, and if it's opposite, it's down. I would argue this actually gets into detrimental tier as well. Rivalry is an ability I think is actually really bad, considering the fact that you do have a lot of Pokemon that are just outright gender locked, and a lot of Pokemon with Rivalry too are just outright not that good. I think that Rivalry is one of those things that, while you do have the benefit of 1.5 times, the fact that you can also go down to 0.75 times if it's the opposite gender is what, in my opinion, makes it detrimental. I think if it had something like double damage for same gender, but then like 0.75 times for opposite, I think at that point it'd be pretty good, just because of the fact that there would be enough of a gain to going for this risk to where I would say that you could actually justify it. So it's detrimental in my opinion. RKS, this is just a worse version of multi-type, and we had put multi-type in top tier, so I'm putting RKS in strong ability, just because of how the drives interact. Rockhead, immunity to recoil damage, which is pretty decent actually. I'm putting this in the average ability tier. I think it's just the fact that you get the immunity, but you don't really get any other benefit. It's not like you get some sort of damage boost, even if it was slim, it's just an immunity, which is still decent, but it's also not immunity to stuff like Struggle, Life Orb, or Crash. If you could even just get the immunity to those and no damage boost, I would say this is a top tier ability, because you could pair this with stuff like Life Orb and go really well offensively. But at this point, it's just a worse version of Magic Guard in a lot of different ways, because Magic Guard gets you not only all the immunity to all of the stuff like Recoil, Life Orb, etc., but you also get a status immunity. So Rockhead is just a worse version by a good amount than Magic Guard. Rough Skin, contact is extra damage. This just goes where I put Iron Barbs, or I think I put Iron Barbs in strong. Yep, it's the same ability. Runaway allows you to get away from battles. This is a missed opportunity in my opinion actually. Runaway I think would be really cool if they made this an ability that got out of trapping abilities like Shadow Tag, Arena Trap, etc. And I think with that in mind, Runaway would actually be a kind of decent ability. Albeit, I will also say there are no good abusers of this ability to really take advantage of that. Like, this wouldn't suddenly make Dunsparce some sort of OU Pokemon to handle Goth, but I do think the ability would actually have a use if you can get out of trapping abilities. So it has no competitive use, it's just really disappointing. Sand Force boosts damage in sand. I think this is pretty good, but objectively, again, you're trying to boost speed in sand, which is why I'm putting Sand Rush. Where did I put Swift Swim? I think I put, I didn't get to Swift Swim. Where did I put Chlorophyll? A top tier? Yeah, Sand Rush still gets there for sure. Boosting speed and weather is incredible in my opinion, and I think it's Sand Force is just one of those things that, in theory, it's cool, but it's only affecting sand-based types being ground, rock, and steel. So I think it's just average in all honesty. Sand Spit, when you make contact it activates sand. I actually do think this is a decent ability. I'm putting this in strong specifically because of the fact that you could honestly fish for this in certain situations to stack to a Pokemon, activate sand later on, and then try and specifically tailor when you want sand to activate until the contact move that would kill this Pokemon. Albeit, I will say it is based on specifically contact. Actually, because it's based on specifically contact, I'm going to put it in average. If this was just something that activated in general when attacked, whether contact or otherwise, that would be really good. Oh no, it is just hit by an attack. Okay, so then yeah, it gets strong ability. The fact that it's just hit by an attack and it activates, it's really good because you could just throw this in on really any sort of Pokemon that's setting up and wait for them to kill you, and then your stand is activated for as long as possible for the next Pokemon to come in. So strong ability for sure. Sand Stream. It sets sand. This is just, again, one of those things that where did I put Trout? Where did I put Trout? It's up here. Yeah, Sandstream gets this, and I think it's purely the fact that you don't need to be attacked to activate this, and it's not. I think that Sandspit's biggest benefit is the fact that you would need to. Typically, the best way to utilize this is on a turn that you can guarantee Sandaconda will die. I think with Sandstream, though, it's typically something you will just long-term try and benefit from setting weather as long as possible. And while you could, in theory, do that with Sandspit, I think it's just the fact that why bother doing that when you need to be attacked to do this, and you could, in theory, be just stalled out by a move like Toxic and get around it that way. So I think it's just the fact this has an actual detriment, even if it has a potential benefit as well. I think it's just the fact that you can wait until this Pokemon dies to pop it off, to where I wouldn't put it in something like Niche. Sandfill, this gets the accuracy thing with, yeah, it makes you less hard, it makes you harder to hit with Weather Up. This gets average as well. I know this has uncompetitive strats you could pair with this with stuff like Bright Powder and Sand Tandem and really make this hard to hit. But typically, again, I think you'd rather just go for the speed boost or the damage boost in most matchups. Next up, though, we do have Sap Sipper, Grass Immunity, and you get an attack buff when hit by grass attacks. I would say this definitely gets the strong ability tier. The fact that you also get the damage buff with this is really cool. On top of the fact it's a physical option, there's some pretty decent abusers of this, definitely strong. Schooling, decent. This makes Wishy-Washy usable. I'll give it average. Actually, I'm gonna give this strong ability off the fact this makes a Pokemon like Wishy-Washy as the lowest BSC in the game a usable Pokemon, and that's really the only reason it gets top tier. Scrappy, it makes 7 Ghost is no longer immune to normal or fighting. This is easily actually a top tier ability. The fact that you get around a type that has not 1 but 2 immunities, and you can get around both of them, that's honestly really insane in my opinion, because this outright just makes this type with a normal and fighting have no immunity, and it hits Ghost neutral too. It's not even a resisted hit. Screen Cleaner, when you switch in, this gets rid of screens and all that sort of stuff. Honestly, I think this is a really strong ability. It's just on a really shit Pokemon, but the ability to clear through any sort of screens, including Auroraville, is something that I think in doubles actually is really appreciated on status wise. It's just on a Pokemon that has no business being run. But if you gave this to any sort of actually bulky Pokemon, I think this would, like, bulkier than Mr. Rhyme, I should say, because that's also not really a bulky Pokemon. But I would say that this has potential to actually be a really good ability. It's just the fact that, well, actually, oh, it's on both sides? Oh, never mind. I thought it was only on one side. This gets niche. This gets niche off the fact that you clear your own screens too. That fucking sucks. Serene Grace boosts the secondary effects and stuff. Definitely a strong ability. I know a lot of people, anyone who's ever lost ladder game will in that moment say this is an uncompetitive ability, should not exist. But I think the fact that Serene Grace just makes it so when the secondary effects are doubled, not guaranteed. There's a lot of these moves that typically only would, even after Serene Grace, hit like 40% chance of activating. I think it's just a really good ability, and I wouldn't say it's top tier because of the fact that it's only off the secondary effects. It doesn't add on anything as well outside of that. And you need to really be running specific moves to actually pop this off. And while those moves are fairly easy to run, you could easily just throw on a Flamethrower or an Air Slash. I think it's just the fact that this tailors a lot of specific movesets, and there are some cases where Togekiss probably wouldn't even really care about going for flinches. Or even just whatever Pokemon that's running this. So, and we've even seen that where Serene Grace Pokemon will outright ignore going for the flinch cheese route that we typically would see them run. And where even Pokemon like Rachi, for example, it runs like a it's one of its most common sets these days, is a moveset that takes no advantage of Serene Grace. You don't really see the Scarf sets being ran anymore because Rachi just has better options. And I think it's one of those things where people are starting to realize you don't need to take advantage of Serene Grace to make it just to make these Pokemon good. And it's one of those things that it's just a good benefit on the side to have the ability to do these things or scare your opponent into thinking you can do these things. And I think it's really the best benefit of Serene Grace is scaring your opponent thinking you can use it. But as itself, it's not really a broken ability, so strong ability. Shadow Shield, this is just a better version of Multiscale. Multiscale, I will say, unlike something such as Filter, where I did lower it because of the fact that Prism War was competitive, I think that Multiscale is so good, and it's such a decent ability. This is really an incredible ability, especially with boots, that I don't think a Shadow Shield being immune to Mold Breaker invalidates this thing's tier list. I do think a Filter outright would go down because the fact that it was kind of a fringe top tier ability anyway, because of how low the damage bust on the resistance, because of how well you take the hits extra, I think that Filter wouldn't necessarily go up to top tier, but I think that Multiscale is already one of the better abilities in here anyway, and Shadow Shield is just a better version of it. Shadow Tag, this is an ability that I would say is a top tier ability. I think this is one of those things where, again, as I mentioned with singles, while there is a precedent for trapping being okay in doubles, specifically from Gothitelle, that's where all the trapping benefit comes, and I think occasionally a wob or two is snuck in there. It's typically not something I think that is really as uncompetitive in singles as it is in doubles. I will say that there were people who pointed out that Gothitelle has had tournament usage, and yeah, Gothitelle has tournament usage. It's not really a surprise. It's got an incredible ability. But when you need to make sure to really utilize Shadow Tag to an actually uncompetitive degree, that you're now accounting for 2 Pokemon that need to be able to actually be pressured by Gothitelle, and if even one of them can hit Gothitelle well, you're in a bad position, especially when one of the best Pokemon right now massacres Gothitelle, being Incineroar. And even just outside of that, let's say you pair this on some Pokemon that maybe resist Incineroar. Well, great. There's a lot of Pokemon that I think that can resist Incineroar, such as other fire types, that now need to deal with Landorus, which is also really top tier Pokemon. And the top like 5 or 10 Pokemon all kind of check each other pretty well, to where I don't think there would ever be a situation where a team would truly be completely screwed over by Shadow Tag, no matter what type of Pokemon you give it to. You could give this to a Ghost type, Incineroar. You can give this to a Grass type, Incineroar. You can give this to a Water type, Regieleki and Rillaboom. You can give this to a Steel type, Landorus and Incineroar. You can give this to a Dragon type. Tapu Fini is still an incredible option, which I know Tapu Fini is a decent step down from those other 4, but it's still an incredible option. And I think it's one of those things to where there will never truly be a Shadow Tag Pokemon that I think has enough that it can get around in VGC this generation to actually make this work, even if you hack Monted in on something. I think that really the best case scenario would unironically be giving Shadow Tag to something with Perish Song, like we did with Mega Gengar in previous generations. But even still, Mega Gengar had a lot of matchup issues against stuff like Landorus and Incineroar. So again, I don't think that that would ever really get to an uncompetitive should not exist sense, because of how much Shadow Tag is weighed down in doubles, because of how many variables you need to get perfectly right. In singles, this is an uncompetitive ability. It's uncompetitive as fuck, and I think this is an even better one than Arena Trap, but I don't think it's as consistently broken. Stuff like Huge Power and Pure Power have the potential to be broken in doubles still, because it's just an attack race. You don't need to get things right to do this. Regenerator even has the potential to be better in doubles, but the issue is typically that a lot of these Pokemon are just outclassed by other things. It's not a matter of the ability being outclassed, just the Pokemon. Stuff like Tornadus Therian that has Regenerator, it's a decent Pokemon, but Tornadus Eye with Prankster is just better. Stuff like Slowbro, having the potential to be a really good bulky water and switch out and set Trick Room for teams, there's just a lot of better Trick Room setters. So I think it's one of those things where it's not the ability's fault in that case. I think with Shadow Tag though, it's just the ability's fault. Even with As One and Parental Bond, again, these abilities would still be cracked in doubles. They're just not. I mean, As One actually is still fucking broken in doubles, let's be honest, but Parental Bond just has no users. But the point being is that Shadow Tag is still an incredible ability, but I think unlike these 5 abilities up here, it's not like absurdly broken in both tiers. It's just a good ability in doubles, and it's an absurdly broken one in singles. For these should not exist, I really am looking for abilities that break both formats. If it's not going to be really broken in both formats, it's not going up there. These 5 though, I think are. I just have to go into that because I know a lot of people were really confused by the Arena Trap placement. I had to clarify. Shed Skin, being able to clear status randomly, average ability. I think the fact that it's not after a certain amount of turns, or like half turns or something, is the reason why I can't put it up higher. Sheer Force ignores statuses on secondary effects, and in exchange you get a damage boost. I'd say Sheer Force is a really strong ability. I think that I will say though is, unlike something such as an adaptability, or Dark Aura, or other things of that sort, the fact that you can't consistently gain this boost, and the fact that you only get it on moves that have secondaries, and the fact that you have to get rid of the secondary to do so, while it does make Pokemon a lot stronger, I think that in general this is just a strong ability. And I think there are even other abilities comparable here, stuff like Aerolate and Pixelate, that make Pokemon a lot better than they would be without them, but it doesn't mean that they are suddenly like top 5 abilities because they do that.
And I think it's one of those things where the Pokemon in the strong ability tier, I think they just have a lot less drawback in their damage boosts, and there's a lot better offensive abilities to where, while, for example, Sheer Force is what makes Nidoking an OU Pokemon, it doesn't mean the ability itself is a top tier. It just makes Nidoking a top tier, if that makes sense. Shell Armor, just immunity to crits. Where do we put Battle Armor? Because it's literally just Battle Armor. I'm pretty sure I put this in the strong ability tier. Yeah, Battle Armor. Okay, so Shell Armor is literally just another reskin. Shield Dust. I think Shield Dust is immunity to status moves, I want to say. I do actually need to double check this because, again, it's one of those abilities you don't really see because of the distribution. Yeah, it's not affected by secondary. Oh, okay. I forgot. We actually do see this on Repel Me. Shield Dust is pretty good, actually. I think one of the biggest benefits is it's immune to all secondary effects, stuff like Fake Out, even, for example. I think that alone makes it really good because you could typically, even in singles, utilize this against Fake Out leads that would try and get around Sash web setters, or even just for Focus Sash hazard setting Pokemon. So for sure, strong ability. Next up, Shields Down. This makes Minior viable, but at the same, and actually I will say, Shields Down as well, giving in the shield form the immunity to status is really good. Definitely a top tier ability for sure. Simple, doubles damage boosts, doubles damage drops. I'm gonna give this strong. I wouldn't give it top tier because of the fact that this also doubles damage drops. It's pretty simple. It has as much of a drawback as it gives, and stuff like Sheer Force, again, pretty similar. Or even stuff like No Guard. In fact, No Guard is the best comparison here because it's literally just the same exact instance, just instead of doing accuracy ignoring, this is for damage. This is for stat raises and drops. Skilling makes all multi-hit moves hit 5 times. I'm going to give this actually the strong ability tier. Being able to hit multi-hit moves really well is actually incredible. And this makes multi-hit moves hit for easily like 100 and something base power every single time. And the fact that you can also pair these a lot with stab options, stuff like Icicle Spear and Cloyster or Tail Slap on Chichito, I think it's really good actually. This is definitely a strong ability. I don't think it's top tier though, but it's got competition, I would say. This is one of the better ones in my opinion in this tier. Slow Start. Detrimental, no one should need me to explain this. Slush Rush, speed boosting version of, it's just the Hail version of Sand Rush. Top tier ability, it's just the Hail version. Sniper, double damage on crits. I would say this is a strong ability, actually. We've seen this as a really good option in a lot of stall breakers. Stuff like Drapion, for example, can run this with Focus Energy. In fact, Kingdra's one of the best examples I can think of historically of this, where Kingdra would typically run this ability with Focus Energy sets and go for Draco spamming. And it's really good because you not only can get around really setup heavy sets that are going for special defensive setups, but you also get around your special attack drops, which is really useful in my opinion. So this is a really strong ability, I would say. I don't think it's top tier though, because typically to make this work really well, you need to dedicate an item slot and Focus Energy to really guarantee you're getting that. So it's a little bit condition heavy, I would say, to make it top tier. But I would say this is, again, one of those really close abilities that I could get the case for top tier, in my opinion. Next up though, we have Snowcloak, just sand version of this hail version of Sandville. So average. Snow Warning, this is the Hail setter. This gets the top tier ability for sure. Next up, we have Solar Power. Solar Power is decent actually. And the one thing I will say is the fact that unlike with Sand Force, this actually does go in the strong ability tier, specifically because this boosts special attack as a whole by 1.5. And even with the damage, with the 1/8 health per turn, I still think it's worth it because the fact you're boosting a whole stat and you're not just boosting a couple of types of moves, and also the damage boost is more. For Sand Force it's 1.3 times, and for Solar Power it's 1.5 times. So I do think that is actually a pretty big difference to note. This isn't just some reskin, it is an actually different ability. Strong abilities here. Next up, Solid Rock. This is just a filter reskin, so it gets the strong ability tier. Soul Heart. Okay, Soul Heart's a fucking uncompetitive ability. Soul Heart is fucking broken. This is probably it. If I had to guess, I think this is the last ability that we'll get up here. And it's specifically because of the fact that Soul Heart also works off of allies. This is an ability that makes Magearna really broken in singles. It's really only outclassed by BST in Ubers at the very least, and like Natdex, for example, for AG. But it still gets it banned to Ubers, and it's still not a terrible Pokemon there, albeit it's just, again, outclassed by a lot of things that are more broken. But the ability itself is fucking insane, because anytime a Pokemon dies, including to hazards, this is an ability that will outright gain a stat boost, guaranteed. So this is an outright uncompetitive ability, should not exist.
Next up, we have Soundproof. It's immunity to sound moves, but it does go both ways, because the fact this does mean that you're also immune to stuff like Heal Bell on your end. I'm going to give this average. If this worked similarly to where it only affected the opponent's sound moves, similar to how Punk Rock will give you the resistance to your opponent's sound moves, and you get the damage buff for yours, to where it's truly only a net positive against sound, I would say this is a strong ability because an immunity is still really good, but it does kind of hurt you in the sense for trying to clear status. This means that you're forced to use aromatherapy if you want to go for status clearing on a Pokemon like Exploud, so I will give it average. Next up, we have Speed Boost. Boost your speed every turn. You can farm this with Protect pretty easily. This is easily a top tier ability. Similarly to stuff like Beast Boost, you can get a stat boost pretty freely, and you could typically cheese this in a way to where you can really snowball teams this way. The one difference though is that Speed Boost is every turn whether you get a KO or not, and so while Beast Boost will have the benefit of being able to tailor this to whatever stat you want, Speed Boost is in a vein where you just get this whether you get the KO or not. So I think that's the benefit here in my opinion, to where I do think that this is an actual still top tier ability, unlike something such as Chilling Neigh or Grim Neigh, or even just like a Moxie. So definitely top tier in my opinion. Next up, we do have Stakeout. When your opponent switches its functions as Pursuit, it does double damage to the incoming Pokemon. I would say Stakeout's a strong ability. I think this is just on a really bad Pokemon, but it's a really good ability. Being able to really pressure Pokemon switching in like that. In fact, if I had to guess, actually the better comparison was probably a Fish's Friend. But the fact that you can make sure that you're doubling the damage you're doing to the Pokemon with whatever move you use, as long as they switch, I think that's what makes this strong. Because you could definitely tailor this, for example, bringing Thievul on a Psychic type and then going for a move predicting their switch in. Maybe you think they're going to go into a Fighting type and you click Player Off, it's not doing double damage. Your opponent switching is not fucked. And I think that, with that in mind, it's definitely a strong ability for sure. Stall. Detrimental. This is the worst ability on this list actually, and it's one of those that a lot of people I think forget about because of how good Sableye is with innovating Pricer as the ability it trademarked. But Stall is really actually Sableye signature ability. It makes it so then you are always moving last among moves that are using the same or greater priority than you. So really your opponent would have to use a negative priority move if you're using something like Shadow Ball, for example, or if you're using Shadow Sneak, they would need to use a base priority move, and otherwise they're not underpacing you. But if let's say you're going for Shadow Ball, even if you're like a Choice Scarf Sableye 252 speed and you're attacking a Slowbro with minus speed, you will always hit last if you're using Stall. Detrimental ability, this is the worst ability on the list, for sure. It's not even close in my opinion. I know that a lot of people will say that stuff like, oh, you know, Slow Star or Defeatist are really bad. No, it is Stall. That is the worst ability. It's the worst ability, and it's so bad that you don't even remember it exists. Easy bottom tier. Stalwart, this is the same as Propeller Tail. It's literally just a reskin of that. Stamina, really good ability. Every time you're hit by a move, whether physical or special, contact or otherwise, you get a defense boost. Really good ability in my opinion. Helps a lot with Mudstill being obnoxious, and I kind of hope to give this to a lot of other Pokemon in the future. It's a really cool defensive ability, and I think it helps a lot, especially with stuff like Body Press now existing. Really great ability. I think without Body Press existing even still though, this would still just be a strong ability. So I don't think that that's really the big difference. It helps enough. Stance Change, it's a decent ability. It makes Aegislash actually really defensively potent and offensively potent as well, because you change between two forms simultaneously just by clicking King Shield. Or King Shield to go back to defensive and an offensive move to go to offensive. Really good ability, top tier for sure. Next up, we have Static. It's just Flame Body, but for electric. Steadfast. Steadfast, I'm pretty sure this was just when you're flinched. It's either flinch or dark move. I'm forgetting which it is. I'm pretty sure this is just when you're flinched, you raise your speed by 1. Yeah, okay. I would say this is average. You do need to bang on the flinch, but this is a little bit more manageable to utilize in VGC because of how much fake out spam there is. It's still really good. Steam Engine, when you're hit by a water or a fire move, you get the +6 speed. I think it's the fact that there's the or fire move here that is a top tier ability for sure. Because even still, even in VGC, people will still hit Colossal consistently with water moves and make this an absolute monster. And +6 speed is nothing to sleep on. +6 speed means you're outpacing even on Colossal a lot of common Choice Scarf or Weather Pokemon, which is fucking insane. So this is an easy top tier for sure. Alright, next up we do have Steelworker. This boosts Steel type moves. It's literally just the same thing as Dragon's Maw, but for Steel. This is definitely another one of those definitely top tier ability. So the fact that you can just guarantee steal is going to get boost. And I think that Delmize was actually a really cool Pokemon to introduce this on because of the fact that you do essentially give this thing now three different stabs. Just because of the fact that it's guaranteed going to be a 1.5 boost, whether physical or special for steal. A really cool ability, top tier for sure. Steely Spirit, I'll be honest, I forget what Steely Spirit is or what the difference is between this and Steelworker. But Steely Spirit makes it 7 than allies steel type moves. Oh, this Pokemon and its allies steel type moves are buffed by 1.5. This is just a better version of Steelworker then. Okay, well, then in that case, we'll put Steely Spirit in the top tier, and I'm gonna actually bump down Steelworker just because it's literally an inferior version of Steel Spirit. I have yeah, it's just an inferior version because of the fact that this is also for allies. So that's the only reason the Steelworker's down here is because of the fact that it's inferior. Stench, 20% more chance to flinch. This gets an average, this gets strong. No, it's average, because typically what I would utilize for flinching is Serene Grace, and while I know it's not the only chance, I may as well go for Serene Grace because you can get a lot more coverage out of it. Well, actually, no, this makes every move have 20% more if it makes contact, if I remember. So that's actually pretty good because it's not even limited to just flinching yeah, it's not just limited to flinching moves. I guess it's 10%, but 10% is still pretty good. Just the fact that without a chance to flinch, it makes them 10% guaranteed. So I would say that that's a strong ability for sure. Sticky Hold, you can't lose your item. Honestly, I would say it's a strong ability. Items are such an important part of competitive these days, and making sure you guarantee have it is a pretty nice buff in my opinion. Strong for sure. Storm Drain, water immunity, and you get 1.5 special attack. Where did I put Sap Sipper? I think I put this here. Sap Sipper. Where did I put Sap Sipper? Oh, I put it tier higher. Okay. Yeah, I stand by this. Where the fuck did I put Sap Sipper? Oh my god, why did I lose Sap Sipper? A strong ability? Yeah, I would still put it in the strong ability. It's literally just the same as Sap Sipper in my opinion, just for special attack instead of physical attack. Strong Jaw next, boosting jaw moves. Still a really good ability in my opinion, just it's one of those things that it's so limited, and even stuff like Tough Claws just outclasses this because any sort of contact move, including jaw moves, so this gets an average ability despite being a 1.5 buff. It's a really good damage buff, just objectively there's abilities that do its job and more. Sturdy, guaranteed immunity from full health. This is definitely a strong ability for sure. Albeit, it's definitely a lot harder to pull off because of stuff like hazards, but you could pair this with boots and guaranteed it'll go off as long as you don't lose damage. And even still, basically the security of starting on a lead, it just guarantees you a free turn 1 to do whatever you want, whether it's rocks, explosion, etc. And on a lead, you can pair it with Cuss Tap and get the priority hit next turn. So for sure, this is a strong ability. Suction Cups. I'll be honest, I think this just means that you can't force the Pokemon to switch out, but I don't actually remember. Yeah, it can't be forced to switch out by an opponent's attack or item. That's kind of cool, actually. I would say this is niche for sure. I can't really name a lot of situations where this would matter, but it could matter for a certain set of sweepers, actually, and be kind of decent. Super Luck, it's just more likely to crit. I would say that Sniper's just a better version because Sniper, while Super Luck, yes, you can crit more often. I think Sniper being the damage booster crits, and you can still guarantee it pretty much. I would say it's a better ability, and this is just a worse version, despite crits still being really good. Surge Surfer, this is just the terrain version of Swift Swim and all those other abilities. This is for sure top tier. Next up, we have Swarm, just a bug type version of Overgrow. Sweet Veil, Sweet Veil is pretty interesting. I do forget exactly how this works, but I'm pretty sure this is similar. Okay, yeah, so it can't fall asleep, and those are already sweep. So it's just sleep version of Pastel Veil. Definitely niche for sure. Swift Swim, as I mentioned, this is one of those weather sweeping abilities, definite top tier. Swift Swim probably is the best one of these, but they're all still top tier for sure. Symbiosis, I think this means that it shares an item with the partner Pokemon if for some reason it loses an item, which has its benefits. I would say this is still niche though for sure. There's not really a lot of instances where I would say you really want to give up your item slot just to help out the partner. But at the same time, in a Pokemon like Orguru, which is meant to just be a support piece, is kind of cool. I think this is one of the better options to take advantage of it in theory because of how much Orguru's role is reliant on being a support piece, but it's still not a good ability in my opinion. Synchronize makes it so that way that if you get status, your opponent does too. I would say this is average. A lot of the Pokemon that get synchronized just benefit more from Magic Guard or Magic Bounce. And even Magic Bounce is just a better version of this because you don't have to get status for it to bounce back and status your opponent. Tangled Feet, I think this is for confusion. You get an evasion boost, which is pretty good. I would say that this is still a kind of okay ability. Yeah, it's doubled evasiveness as long as you're confused. I think the fact that you need to be confused to activate this gets it niche. If it just gave an immunity to confusion moves and instead made you evasive and rose your evasiveness stat,
I would say that's actually a strong ability, but because of how Tangled Fleet actually does work, this gets niche. Tangling Hair is just gooey, but it's just gooey, but for another move, niche ability. Technician makes weaker base power moves that are under 60 get a damage boost. This definitely, I would say, gets a strong ability, specifically because of how many moves that qualify for getting the Technician boost that are priority attacks. And this makes a lot of priority moves like Bullet Punch, Aqua Jet, Mach Punch all gain an extra damage boost, which is pretty decent, as well as stuff like Rock Tomb, Pursue. A lot of other of these weak moves have really good secondary effects. And I think it's because of how good the secondary effects are on a lot of these moves that puts this in the strong ability tier, in my opinion. Next up, we do have Telepathy. Partner Pokemon can't actually hurt you. Really decent ability for doubles. I'll give it average. The fact that you can't get Earthquake by partner Pokemon or Surf by them is really good in my opinion. Terrible, just a better version of Mold Breaker. But again, similarly to how I put Shadow Shield still in here with Multiscale, Mold Breaker is still such a good ability that I'm going to keep Terrible here, even if it's just a better version. Next up, we have Thick Fat. Makes that when you take less from fire and ice attacks. I'll put this in the average tier. I think the fact that a lot of these Pokemon gain, in some cases like Venusaur, for example, a really crucial extra resistance to fire attacks, and ice as well in that case, it's really like the best case scenario for it. But even still, Pokemon like Mamoswine now don't really care about taking fire hits, or stuff like Walrein don't really care about taking fire hits, despite these Pokemon otherwise maybe mining so, especially in Walrein's case where it's a water type that would otherwise without Thick Fat be neutral to fire. Definitely a cool ability, but I think that again, there's just a lot better defensive abilities. Tinted Lens makes some of the resistances still take more damage from your attacks. This is definitely a strong ability. In fact, it's one of the biggest reasons why Venomoth has literally never been allowed in RU in like 3 generations. This ability is fucking insane. And the fact that you could tailor Tinted Lens to really help with a lot of resistances. For example, with Tinted Lens, you're able to make it so then you can deal neutral damage to a lot of just pure steel type psychic moves, which is really useful because a lot of the mons that typically use Tinted Lens have otherwise Pokemon that they're attacking that really only 1 times resist them, well, 2 times resist them. So it's not Pokemon like Heatran, for example, where you would really care about going for like a psychic move. These are like you Pokemon that are trying to just get past the single resistance checks. So I do think that with that in mind, this is a really strong ability, and it can make some really dog shit Pokemon like actually obnoxiously good offensively. Even Mega will give up speed boost sometimes just to run this ability. So for sure, this is a strong ability, and it's a really good one at that. Torrent, water type version of Blaze. Tough Claws, this is just a better version of Strong Jaw, and I would actually put this in the top tier ability tier. This is just for any sort of contact moves, you get the damage boost. So I would actually no, because I think the difference being is that with stuff like Guerrilla Tactics, well, actually, no, because Guerrilla Tactics does have a topic. Yeah, okay. So I'll put this in top tier for sure. The fact that any contact moves get a 1.5 times boost, Tough Claws is really good in that regard. Stuff like Flare Blitz, you don't need to just do the Fangs. You get Elemental Punches, obviously, with this as well. Definitely just a really good ability offensively. Wait, it's only 1.3? Oh, I thought it was 1.5. Never mind, I take it back. This gets the strong ability tier for sure. I think if it had the Choice Bandit boost, I could put it up with stuff like Guerrilla Tactics. But Guerrilla Tactics just having a higher damage boost, same as stuff like Intrepid Sword, and Intrepid Sword also has like no drawback. Definitely still strong ability. Next up, Toxic Boost, when it's just Guts, but for strictly only poison. So this gets average because Guts just is a better version of it because it works with all status. Next up, Trace copies your opponent's ability. I think this also gets an average ability. This could in theory be really good, but at the same time just give these Pokemon better abilities to begin with, and they don't need to care about Trace. It's really good for scouting though, especially with some more discrete abilities like for example Magic Guard or Unaware before you get Hazards up. Could be pretty good to scout those, and you could take advantage of those really well. But at the same time, I think really the biggest benefits are against really hyper defensive teams, you copy something like a Magic Guard, or against really offensive teams, you copy their weather sweeping abilities, stuff like Swift Swim or Chlorophyll. Otherwise though, I think this is an average ability. It just has really good cases. Transistor, this is just Dragon type, this is just Electric type Dragon's Moss, so it gets a top tier ability. Next up, we have Triage, priority to healing moves, and it's +3 priority too. I think it's a +3 priority specifically that actually puts us in the strong ability tier, in my opinion, for me. Especially in doubles, you could actually tailor this pretty well against a lot of dragons, and in my opinion, become an absolute monster offensively. So for sure, this definitely gets the strong ability tier, in my opinion. Also, the one downside I will say that keeps that top tier is the fact this doesn't work with stuff like Leech Seed. But otherwise though, if it's a direct healing that instance move, including offensive stuff like Draining Kiss and Kick a Drain, it's +3 priority, so we'll give it strong. Next up, Truant, our last detrimental ability that I could think of. Turbo Blaze, this is just terrible, but for Reshiram. So this is also another top tier ability. Next up, we have Unaware. Unaware is one of the best defensive abilities we've ever gotten. In our immunity to setup options, this really does allow stall to set up to actually work, in my opinion, in later generations when we've gotten such good setup options, with Dragon Dance being a lot more widespread now, with stuff like Quiver Dance being so common on really good Pokemon now, Swords Dance, even Omni Boost moves like Como signature move, the Clanging Scales. The fact that these moves exist and they're still actually checked by stall teams because of Unaware users in most cases, I think it's the reason why this is a top tier ability, and it's one of the best defensive abilities you can get besides like Magic Guard. Unburden, double speed when you lose your item. I would say this is definitely a strong ability. I'm not going to put it in top tier, and I think it's specifically because of the fact that you still again need to give up an item to do this. But I think unlike a lot of the other abilities where you would give up an item, the trade-off in this case is actually really good because you're doubling a speed stat, which could be really useful for cleaning teams late game, and you can pair this with acrobatics a lot easier in my opinion than something like a Symbiosis where you're only just losing your item and getting acrobatics as a benefit now. The difference here is you're also getting a stat buff while your item is lost, so strong ability for sure. Next up, we have a Nerve. Makes it so when your opponent can't use berries. This is a strong ability. The fact that your opponent can't really use the Resistance Berry to actually check you is really, really useful in my opinion, because it's typically how you would get around certain Pokemon in tiers that are really overwhelming. For example, let's say Galvantula was the best Pokemon in RU because it's a really grass-heavy tier and a really water-heavy tier. I might try and run something like a Lure Berry on a Swampert to get around Giga Drain sets, since this would otherwise be a water type that's immune to electric. But then I find out that Galvantula is running a Nerve and it's going for Energy Ball, and now my Swampert's dead. It's definitely really good in certain situations, albeit I would say that, to be fair, Lure Berries are a lot less common in singles these days, but there's still situations where this is pretty useful. And even still, it's good against stuff like Citrus Berry sets as well, so strong for sure. Next up, Unseen Fist gets around Protect. This is easily a top tier ability. Being able to ignore Protect is pretty huge. I don't think it shreds into Should Not Exist territory, because I think the difference being is that while I can get around Protect, I think that's really just I think it's the moves that more so break your Shifu. Like, for example, if Wicked Blow and Surging Strikes were just high crit ratio moves, I don't think we'd ever really see people complaining in singles, at least, about our Shifu. It's just the fact that they're guaranteed to crit and they're high base power. Whereas in VGC, people would still complain because Protect is a key mechanic. But at the same time, though, I think it's a good balance here for how obnoxious Protect was. So I'm going to keep our Shifu in top tier. Next up, we do have Victory Star. It's just buffs accuracy and stuff. I'll be honest, I think it's just a worse version of Compound Eyes, right? Because Compound Eyes is 1.3 times boost, whereas Victory Star is only a 1.1 times boost. Nope, hold on. Compound. I do need to double check this, because I'm not actually 100% sure. Yeah, it's 1.3 and Victory Star is just a 1.1. So yeah, it's 1.1. So it's just a worse version of Victory Star. And I put Combat as an average, so I'm putting Victory Star in niche. Actually, this also works for allies. I'm gonna put it in average because it also works with allies, even if Victini is almost never allowed in doubles. I think the fact that we finally got a tier where it is leads to me to believe that maybe we'll get this again in the future, but otherwise, yeah. Anyway, Vital Spirit can't be put to sleep. Unlike Early Bird, this isn't just half turns, you just can't be put to sleep. Pretty decent in that regard. I'll put this in the strong ability tier for sure, just because of the fact that this is a consistent sleep immunity. If it was like Early Bird though, I would probably have just otherwise, actually, yeah, I think it's the fact that you can't get put to sleep. Unlike something such as a Pastel Veil, actually, no, this is literally just Sweet Veil. Yeah, I'm putting this in niche, final answer. Bulb Absorb, this is an immunity, pretty decent. I'm putting this in the strong ability tier because you get recovery back. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna put this in strong ability tier. And similarly, while we're on it, because it's literally like the ability afterwards, I'm putting Water Absorb there too, because it's just the same thing, but for water attacks. Wandering Spirit, this is just when attacked either way, you swap the ability, and it's just an outright swap. I'm putting this in the strong ability tier, because I do actually think that this is a pretty on par ability with Mummy, but I think the difference is the fact that you can actually chain this pretty well on other Pokemon, and the fact that you don't keep the ability, unlike Mummy, you get their ability, which is pretty good. So I could take an opponent's Pokemon's adaptability, let's say, by clicking them with a contact move, and now I'm an adaptability Ghost Ground type, which is pretty good. Albeit, it's high risk, high reward, but I do think that you could tailor this pretty specifically because of the fact it's contact move based, so I'm putting it in strong for sure. Water Bubble, this is a fucking broken ability, because not only does it double the damage of water type moves, but you also get an immunity to burn. This is definitely for sure and should not exist, and I think it's specifically because of the fact of how much better it is than every other one of these moves like abilities like Dragon's Maw. Because stuff like Dragon's Maw, for example, it's only a 1.5 times boost, and even that's like the peak of all of the other damage boosting ones for specific types. Water Bubble makes it so that you're not only getting a 2 times boost, but you also get a burn immunity, and fire attacks are halved. This is fucking insane. Easily, it's one of those abilities that it's so lucky it's on such a dog shit Pokemon otherwise, outside of the ability. Otherwise, this would be like a flat out anything goes Pokemon if it was even on a Pokemon like 600 BST. So easy should not exist for sure. Okay, so next up we do have the Water Compaction. Water Compaction gets a average ability, and it's solely for the fact this isn't an immunity. However, the boosts are still really nice with Water Compaction. It's just the fact that sadly this really should have just been an immunity. The +2 defense instead of just 1, which is typically common of moves like abilities like Storm Drain. It's at least a nice thing that keeps it out of the niche in my opinion. Just the fact you get 2 stages instead of 1, but you have to take the hit, which is unfortunate. However, this could be kind of cool on weakness policy variants, I guess. Still average for sure. Water Veil. This, I think it just means that in rain you can't get statused or something like that. In fact, I think it's really just burn specifically. Yeah, just specifically burn. It's just a burn immunity. It's not even rain related. Niche. Weak Armor. When hit by a contact move, you gain double speed and you drop your defense. This is average just because the fact you also have to drop your defense is really the only thing. White Smoke. I think it's just an accuracy immunity. I do have to actually double check this because I'm not actually sure. It's not an ability you really see. Yep, just lower stat changes. Okay, so it's all stat changes actually. That's actually pretty decent then. If it's all stat changes, we gotta put this with Clear Body, which I think Clear Body we put in the strong ability tier. Yeah. So this is literally just reskin Clear Body then. I always thought it was just accuracy only, but that's pretty decent. Wimp Out, it's just the same thing as the other ability. Where do we put the fucking Golisopod ability? I'm forgetting where we put it. So Emergency Exit, I want to say that this is definitely in the average ability tier if I had to guess. No, was this really a niche? Yeah, it was a niche. Okay, so then I'm putting it in niche. I mean, niche is still fine. Wonder Guard, this is a fucking broken ability, just a really bad Pokemon. Definitely one of those abilities that, in my opinion, say it with me guys, should not exist. Being able to only be hit by super effective attacks is broken. It's just on a Pokemon with a lot of weaknesses and very much nerfing to make it competitive. Wonder Skin, I think this is just an immunity to status moves. I don't actually, again, it's one of those things you don't really see a lot. Wonder Skin, yeah, it's 50% when status moves. Oh, okay, well that's actually pretty good. Okay, so I'll put it in average. If it's an immunity, I would have put it in strong, but the fact that it's only 50%, actually wait, yeah, I'm gonna put this in 50%. That's on the average, it's fine. Because I was gonna compare it to something like a Magic Guard, where again, it's just a better instance because you get an immunity to statuses. But this is also just for any status. It's not just for status like burn, toxic, etc. It's just any status move. It's 50%, which is pretty cool. So we'll give this average. Finally, though, we have Zen Mode. Zen Mode, I'm gonna put in niche. It's no longer detrimental, and I will say that it's specifically because of Galardarm making this a really good ability, but it's such a niche thing. Considering Zen Mode, Galardarm is such a good Bellatrix sweeper. But at the same time, though, when you switch out, you reset it. So we'll put it in niche. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the ability tier list, though. If you want to do this yourself, I forgot if I mentioned this last time, but I did link down below the tier list. So try it for yourself and let me know what you guys disagree with or agree with. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, though, leave a like in the video and subscribe for more. Shout out to our channel members being Josh K, Ultraplayer, Mia, and Z. Your guys' support is greatly appreciated. And if you want to become a channel member today, click on the link down below to that, as well as my Twitter and Discord, where you can stay up to date on videos whenever you want. With that said, though, I will see you guys in tomorrow's video. Until then, peace out, guys.